Tinubu receives international investors, expresses readiness for strengthened partnerships.
President Tinubu replaces all service chiefs and advisors.
Federal government constitutes committee to investigate alleged PMS unpaid duties.
So we've agreed to give the parties 3 months to come to the conclusion. So we are open, but it is not to say that anybody will take advantage of the country. We have the law, and the law must be respected.
On Good Morning Nigeria today, we shall discuss how to curb excessive demand for foreign exchange.
It is obvious that the current administration is desirous of turning around the economy, considering the steps taken so far by the federal government.
You're right, Jumai, and some of those measures include, of course, the unification of the foreign exchange rate with a view to making ultimately the Nigerian economy vibrant and eliminating abuses.
Yes, and however, achieving this feat might not be feasible if efforts are not being made to curb excessive demand for foreign exchange in the country.
And the demand perspective for foreign exchange varies, of course, and this will include imports of finished goods as well as raw materials. It will also involve PTAs, that's also personal travel allowances, health needs, tourism, and of course education. And some would also add speculative purposes.
Indeed, and you know, Kingsley, yesterday our guest on Good Morning Nigeria spoke on eliminating multiple exchange rates. They said the biggest monster for the demand of foreign exchange is the underground economy, also known as corruption.
Now, the guest emphasized the need to have a mechanism to manage this insatiable, as it were, quest for foreign exchange arising from nefarious activities of unpatriotic elements.
And as the federal government continues to strengthen institutions and block leakages, what steps should be taken to curb the excessive demand for Forex? What sanctions should be put in place to deal with unnecessary demands for Forex in the country? These are some of the questions we intend to solicit for answers as we tackle curbing excessive demand for Forex on Good Morning Nigeria today. We're live on the NTA here in Abuja. I am Jumai Yusuf. Welcome to the program.
And I'm Kingsley Osadolo. I join my colleague Jumai to also welcome you to the program, in the course of which we have our complimentary segments. And those will include newspaper review and business. For now, we take the highlights of the morning news. And here is our colleague, Zenret Digmon. Good morning, Zenret.
Good morning, Kingsley and Jumai. And here's the morning news. President Bola Ahmed Tinubu has approved the immediate retirement of all service chiefs and the Inspector General of Police, advisors and Controller General of Customs from service, and has appointed their replacements with immediate effect. In a statement signed by Willie Bassi, Director Information, Office of the Secretary to the Government of the Federation, the newly appointed officers are Malam Nuhu Ribadu, National Security Advisor. Major General C.G. Musa becomes the new Chief of Defense Staff. Major General T.A. Lagbaja, Chief of Army Staff. Rear Admiral E.A. Ogala, Chief of Naval Staff. AVM H.B. Abubakar, Chief of Air Staff. DIG Kayode Egbetokun, Acting Inspector General of Police, while Major General E.P. Ondiende is now the new Chief of Defense Intelligence. And President Bola Tinubu has approved the immediate dissolution of the governing boards of all federal government parastatals, agencies, institutions, and government-owned companies in the exercise of its constitutional powers and in the public interest. The dissolution does not, however, affect boards, commissions, and councils listed in the third schedule, Part 1, Section 153, Subsection 1 of the 1990. A statement signed by Dele Alake, Special Advisor to the President on Special Duties, Communication and Strategy, says the President will participate in the two-day summit on June 22nd and 23rd. That looks at opportunities to restore fiscal space to countries that face difficult short-term financial challenges, especially the most indebted, mobilize innovative financing for countries vulnerable to climate change, foster development in low-income countries, and encourage investment in green infrastructure for the energy transition in emerging and developing economies. The President will be accompanied by members of the Presidential Policy Advisory Council and senior government officials and will return to Abuja on Saturday. Foreign investors have been expressing readiness to strengthen partnership and increase investment in Nigeria as they commend the new climate for businesses in the country. President Bola Tinubu received in audience some international investors, including Microsoft co-founder Bill Gates and the president of Dangote Group, Aliko Dangote, at the State House.
To do more and to help, Nigeria so that our health sector will keep improving, which will turn out to be better for the whole citizens of the country.
The federal government has set up a technical committee to investigate media reports alleging some ship owners are keeping their vessels away from Nigeria to claw back unpaid duties from 2010 to 2019.
So we've agreed to give the parties 3 months to come to the conclusion, as you've seen from what we're doing and what we will do. So we are open, but it is not to say that anybody will take advantage of the country. We have the law, and the law must be respected.
The 3 petitioners in the February 25, 2023 presidential election have taken their turns before the Presidential Election Petition Court in adducing evidence in aid of their petitions. The petitioners, who have consolidated their petitions in line with the provisions of the Electoral Act 2022, are Atiku Abubakar, Peter Obi, and Allied People's Movement. And about 75,000 hectares of dry season rice farms have been attacked by quilla birds in Agungu, Kebbi State. An estimate of 100 farmers have lost their farms already, while the birds are still raging.
We are in serious problem. Apart from high cost of fuel price and fertilizer, here are the quilla birds. One cannot eat his breakfast at home. If not, the birds will eat all his rice field. I spent over 20 years cultivating rice here, but I've never seen a bird's disaster like this. No matter how you push them away, they keep coming back. As you can see, we have to harvest before time to minimize loss.
Those are the news highlights for now. Good Morning Nigeria continues with Jumai and Kingsley after this.
The African Export-Import Bank, Afrexim Bank, has launched Afrex Insure, a whole-owned insurance management services subsidiary. The bank said Afrex Insure will provide a single entry point for all specialty insurance needs to assist in optimally managing related risks for the trade and commerce. The bank said Afrex Insure will provide a single entry point for all specialty insurance needs to assist in optimally managing related risks for the trade and commerce sector in Africa. Afrex Insure, established in 2021, is set up to offer specialty insurance solutions for trade and trade-related investments across Africa with access to quality, best-in-breed specialty insurance that is tailor-made for Africa. The new subsidiary will support businesses in Afrexim Bank member countries to mitigate the problem of Africa having to rely on external partners to architect the continent's economic resilience and development. It will also help retain insurance premiums in Africa and assist in plowing back Africans' investment into the continent for the enhancement of trade and economic development for the prosperity of the continent. Let's take a look at Monday's trading. With business, Vivian Izadefi.
Thank you very much, Vivian, for the business news package. Coming up next, newspaper review.
newspaper reviewer Chukudi Okole-Ugbaja is in the studio. Good morning, Chukudi.
Good morning, Jumai. How are you doing?
I'm fine.
Morning.
Yeah.
Chukudi, good to see you this morning.
Same here, Kingsley. Good morning.
All right.
Chukudi, we
so
have some papers. Yes, you begin.
3? Yeah. Are you kicking off? Let's start off with the Blueprint newspaper. Blueprint News and the other 2 papers that we have for review this morning. The front page, of course, is virtually similar in terms of the stories, and that has to do with the fresh appointments made yesterday by President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, and that's the lead story for Blueprint. It's also the lead on the other papers. Tinubu elevates Ribadu as NSA, that's National Security Advisor, sacks service chiefs and IGP. Names Musa CDS, that's Chief of Defense Staff, Lagbaja COS, that's Chief of Army Staff, Ogala, Chief of Naval Staff, Abubakar, Chief of Air Staff. Egbetokun is Inspector General of Police, and Adewale, Customs Boss. Dissolves boards of parastatals, jets out to Paris for Global Financial Summit. Details on page 6, and the photographs of the new helmsmen are also right there on the front page. And of course, there's an indication that these appointments are subject to confirmation by the Senate where applicable. Katsina government committed to tackling insecurity. That's according to an official on page 5. Cost of shipping oil from Nigeria soars, 23. We have invested over $4 billion in Nigeria. That's Airtel. And presidential election petition court. Presiding officers say only presidential election results refused to upload. We were trained that where there is no network, we do offline transmission. That's according to a witness.
Let's quickly go to the leadership newspaper. We sort of have similar headlines, and but there's a little, difference in this one. And above the masthead of the leadership newspaper, Tinubu off to France for new global financial summit. Find the details on page 9. Subsidy removal. FG Labour fixed 2 months to implement resolutions. Find details on page 2. And President dissolves boards of MDA, spares INEC 13 orders. You find the details on page 7. And avoid gifts from corrupt litigants. CGN warns judges. You find the details on page 6. And in one fell swoop, Tinubu retires service chiefs, IGP, custom boss, and you can see the pictures of the people taking over the mantle of leadership in all the designated areas that have been retired. Let's quickly go to the Punch newspaper, and above the Punch newspaper, above the masthead, Labour, FG set up minimum wage committee. Find details on page 15. Airfare skyrocket as exchange rate hits $702. Find the details on page 21. Tinubu's foreign investors meets Bill Gates, Airtel founder. Details on page 14. And then we'll have the same headlines here. Tinubu removes security chiefs, custom boss, appoints Ribadu, Egbetokun, orders. Abubakar named Air Chief, Ogala heads Navy, Ribadu now National Security Advisor, Custom gets acting CG, Usman Musawa, Senator Gumel Ibrahim appointed advisors, President travels to France. And at the bottom plate of the Punch newspaper, Tribunal again, LP INEC lawyers clash over poll materials, details on page 14. Terrorists demand 25 million ransom for kidnapped Zamfara Varsity students. Details on page 15. Army alerts Kaduna communities ahead of shooting practice. Find the rest on page 8. Chukudi.
Thank you, Jumai. One of the things Nigerians look forward to, from the new administration was, and it's still, speed. And I want to say that we're seeing that speed. Sometimes you say that haste is of the essence. And in this case, it aptly applies. Removes, replaces, retires, sacks, editor's choice. The important thing is that security chiefs, the customs boss, they have been changed. So, what's going to matter to us is the kind of investigation into their backgrounds that revealed that these are supposed to be the king's men, the president's men. So, has the government made the right choices? No one is going to expect excellence from the part of any human being that is choosing anything. But reasonably speaking, are these men for whom efficiency, effectiveness at the duty post is the watchword? That is what Nigerians are expecting. So we can only say, thank you, Mr. President, for moving as fast as we would want you to move. Nuhu Ribadu, whom we thought was going to be a special advisor, has been stepped up to NSA. I was hearing rumors that some echelons of the military were saying, no, this man is not going to come in, he's junior to us and all that. You think about a man's effectiveness at the duty post and throw sentiment to the winds, because that's where they belong. This country has to move forward. We know the track record of Nuhu Ribadu. We know his zero tolerance, at least perceivably, zero tolerance for corruption. He's a man that is going to have the goodwill of majority of Nigerians, you know, as he does his work. We pray that the other key appointees also have that, you know, disposition, in which case you will do well. Coming from millions of Nigerian throats or lips would be something that they really need. So we commend the president. And he's left for Paris, still on the duty run. Again, speed. Actually, it's the speed I'm more interested in than any other thing. Nigeria needs not just palliatives, but real action to change their lives. The earlier we start. It's not going to be easy, but as I said, goodwill always takes us there. There's a curious one. Before I go to the labor agreement with the federal government, the new Kano governor is saying that debris from demolished structures in Kano would be used to restore Kano walls. And I say I find that interesting. Well, what purpose is that going to serve? Are we still engaging in intertribal wars, in which case we want to hold off the enemy because the walls are too...
It's an historical monument, I think,
historical.
Recognized by UNESCO itself. So
very good. Yes. If UNESCO recognizes it, thank you for chipping in that. Yes. It is something that we should maybe not frown on, you know, because I was going to say that we remember that the Benin moat. Yes. The reason the Benin moat was raised, was, dug, was to make sure that the enemy does not get into the, central during those days, you know. And it worked tremendously. Then finally, the minimum wage. Okay, it's not actually minimum wage we should be talking about strictly. Because it's about living wage. Yes. I like the setting up of a steering committee. I like the fact that they are still talking. I keep on harping on that. They are still talking. Yesterday I made a point of saying the federal government should not squander the goodwill that has come so far from labor and the people of Nigeria. I know how people groan about transport. You offer a man a lift these days, he thinks you have become God. But still, they are holding out. This government is lucky. And I say, let them make sure they manage the situation effectively. Again, nobody achieves 100% in these matters. But let it be seen that the people think that the government is largely moving in the right direction. Living wage, minimum wage, whatever you call it, whatever amount is agreed on, TUC was chipping in 200,000 per month. I don't see that as attainable. But whatever they agree, let it be something that at the end of the day makes us stay together in thinking for country.
All right, Chukwudi, thank you very much for the points that you have raised. Let me probably begin with the subject matter relating to our culture, artifacts, and therefore our history. You were talking about the Kano City Wall.
Yes.
And what the new Kano State Governor has promised to do. I tell you something. I hadn't been to Kano for a long time, and when I visited the place, my first disappointment was to see that sections of the Kano city walls had come down, and that there were even structures built on the perimeter fence of old Kano City, as it were. So it would be a good idea if the governor says, look, part of our plan is to restore the Kano old city walls, because it was a beauty to behold. I've been talking about 40 years or so ago. If you were in Kano, you couldn't miss that. So get it done. And I therefore think that part of what we'll be doing, apart from using the debris or the rubble from the structures that they are pulling down, provided that that is also done with a good deal of adherence to law and order and the Constitution, then restore the old city Kano walls. And all those structures that would appear to be illegal, that are built on the line of the walls, you take them down.
Let them interrogate.
That will qualify, in my opinion, with the requirements of Section 28 of the Land Use Act, that you are doing something, revoking if any CFO was granted or the allocation on the basis of public interest, you are taking that down. But the other ones that they are doing now, I don't know, I'm not sure whether it is just pure politics or somebody is angry and so on and so forth. You spend so much money.
I was looking at cost effectiveness.
Well, you spend money, public funds to erect these things, you spend public funds again to tear them down, and so on and so forth. But what they tend to do with the Kano City was let the governor do it and then turn it again into a tourist attraction, as it always was. The Emir's Palace, of course, is also a tourist attraction, and several other parts of that city. And I don't know what they have done with some of the ponds that were within the city walls. Some of those ponds, I think I read some weeks ago, somebody drowned in one of those ponds. The water was always reeking of unpleasant odor. Are you going to drain off the waters and then use it for other purposes, or are you going to environmentally clean up the water?
Better management.
And then when you clean it up, elsewhere, what they will do, they will introduce some of these docks and other things to be, and people will be fascinated by it. Can you convert that? That's part of what government should be doing in thinking and looking forward. I think that's what to do. Then the other point. Always, we talk about first 100 days. This, of course, arose from John F. Kennedy's administration from 1961. First 100 days, you are trying to no, not from John F. Kennedy, by the way. Much earlier, this arose from the fact that first 100 days, a government would have settled down. There would have been a clear indication as to where it is going. But we can see in the first 21 days of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu's administration, as you did say, a lot of work is ongoing. Well, on the day of his inauguration, as we say, hit the ground running. I remember also indicating that with respect to fuel subsidy removal and the uproar that followed it almost immediately, we said they were like hitting the ground and then aquaplaning, you know, which when an aircraft lands and then it's sliding rather than having the firm traction on the tarmac. But that has been overcome and is stabilized, and we have seen the series of moves and measures that he has taken, and the latest, of course, being with the appointments. But I want to disagree with you, Chukwudi, when you said that it is the choice of the editors what to say, whether sacked, whether removed, whether replaced. I think that
leadership matters.
We also have to be careful. When you say you sack somebody, let's face it.
You're not disagreeing with me. You're actually supporting what I suspected is editor's license.
No, it's not editor's license. Yes. I've been an editor, so I know what it is. So, and you have also been one. It's not a matter of license. It is a matter of appropriate usage.
That's it.
When you sack, it's termination or dismissal.
We are talking about the same thing.
Gentlemen, these are officers who have served this country.
Thank you. Their tenure has ended.
And not tenure, because you hold your office at the pleasure of the president.
Yes.
Whether inherited or incumbent. If you didn't do any wrong and you were removed, it is also at the pleasure of the president. When you say sacked, I don't know. It replaces. Look at right from CDS, General Leo Irabo, brilliant officer. Look at the other service chiefs, brilliant officers. Are you going to say now if these officers who have been appointed, who were appointed yesterday, are also replaced, you will say they were sacked? I tell you,
it replaces. That's the right word.
Precisely. That's what I said.
Replaces.
Replaces.
Not sacked.
No, absolutely not sacked.
Definitely not.
They have been replaced. It is the prerogative of the president.
Thank you.
The prerogative, and everybody expected this anyway.
Yeah.
If you have a new head smile, we say, look, I want to work with my own team. And working with his own team, after a while, we then said, no, I don't want to continue with this set of persons because he's the commander-in-chief. And they will say, look, I need a new set of persons, you know, so you, gentlemen, you step aside. And with honors, they are going to, this Chief of Defense Staff, Chief of Army Staff, Chief of Naval Staff, Chief of Air Staff, and Inspector General of Police, they will have the honor of being pulled out of service meritoriously.
Thank you.
Yes.
None of them has been removed with ignominy. No. You see why I'm saying this, Chukwudi?
Very important.
Look, in 1975, we're reading the Daily Times, reading the Observer. In those days, you will see so hundreds dismissed with ignominy, sacked with ignominy. That was under the Murtala administration before Obasanjo took over. Sacked and dismissed. That was what led to the destruction of our public service. Persons who had served the country meritoriously, you rubbish them in the public imagination, and not many of them were able to pick up their lives after that. And then we then saw the impact that had on the service. So having said that, I think the proper word, if you say that you don't have enough space,
yes,
you reduce the point size of your headline.
Thank you.
And then replaces.
Replaces is the right word.
Replaces, or Tinubu names new service chiefs. There are many synonyms you can use for this particular.
And then as an editor, that's the point at which we want to see your neutrality, come to think of it. Many things come into putting things down as a news person. You have to be circumspect when you're dealing with matters that are sensitive. Yes, don't rubbish a man's tenure in office by using the wrong word at the end of the. And concerning what you said, during Murtala Mohammed era, I think we somehow also picked up martial mentality. Yes, military rule started affecting us. And some of us, of course, we have sycophants trying to appease the government.
You see, I remember this story was told by a very good friend of mine. Unfortunately, he's late now, may his soul rest in peace. He was a commissioner in a state. So the state governor decided to dissolve the cabinet, and he wasn't in the country. So he called his office from outside of the country. And the staff who picked the phone, he was asking the staff, what is happening? You know what the staff told the commissioner? He didn't quite pick his voice. He said, Governor, don't sack all of them.
Mentality.
I said, Governor, don't sack all of them.
Mentality.
That same Governor, don't sack all of them, was reappointed again as a commissioner in the same ministry. And the same person who said, Governor, don't sack all of them, was the first to say, Honorable, welcome.
Governor, don't sack in thinking.
Psychopathy.
I would think Governor, Commissioner, welcome. But I mean, the appropriateness is what we're talking about. But I'm just wondering, though,
yes,
the sense of humor of President Tinubu in all of this. Because what the new service chief for the army, his last name is actually Lagbaja.
Abuja, yes.
So, and I'm sure Nigerians know who Lagbaja is, the famous
Kingsley,
Lagbaja.
this man did not come.
What we saw yesterday, even in the
Kingsley, this man did not come precisely.
Who did?
We can see his face.
So, I hope this Lagbaja, of course, decorated officer. Does he also play the saxophone? Or does he play the trumpet? Or you get a drift.
It could be good on the sax.
That's right. And the acting Inspector General of Police,
yes,
Egbetokun, is a very well-read gentleman. Very well-read. Of course, electronics, electrical engineering, with degrees in
intellect.
With degrees in it. He's moved on also to security and peace studies. He has a doctorate degree, and he had been chief security officer to Tinubu when Tinubu was governor of Lagos. So they also headed the Rapid Response Squad. If you were in Lagos in the 90s and early 2000s, you would know how criminality was reduced to a considerable extent. So We hope for a new
deal. The president knows his capacity.
He does.
So we expect to see Lagbaja one of these days, and then of course.
So Chukudi, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
You're still watching Good Morning Nigeria on the network service. You're watching Good Morning Nigeria on the network service of the NTA, and to set the tone for our conversation, which is on curbing excessive demand for foreign exchange, let's take these excerpts put together by correspondent Oyeyemi Ajayi.
We need to make sure that we have a managed floating exchange rate. We can't allow the naira to float just at whatever vagaries of demand and supply, particularly when we have a monster in the room that we are not able to contain. Now, politicians, civil servants steal our money, and the best way to hide this money is to demand for dollar. Now the next best step that Bola Ahmed Tinubu needs to take is to see how best his government can tame the monster in the room, that is corruption, so that the angle of demand for dollar from the corrupt Nigerians could be tamed, because this angle of demand is the angle that is able to buy dollar at almost any rate. If we isolate, segment, and tame that, believe you me sincerely, we will have an economy that will be vibrant.
What is important for me is not even for the president, in my mind, to appoint ministers. I think it's for the president to create ecosystems. We take another look at the way our MDAs are structured, where you now have directors, oversighting director generals. I don't see why a lot of these synergies or alignments can't be made, so that you have some seamless program that now begins to support the monitoring and evaluation that Doctor had talked about. And then that engagement process, you know who it is you're talking to.
The question of implementation and monitoring is very important. There is need for constant, regular engagement with the organized private sector. I think it would be good to consider something similar to the QBF, the quarterly presidential briefing, maybe with a team of ministers which will come together, which will be appointed by the president himself, so that you can be able to continue to monitor regularly and when there is need for adjustment.
All right, now those were excerpts from the first part of our conversation which took place yesterday. And of course, the title for that had to do with the elimination of the multiple windows for foreign exchange transactions in the country. So today, arising from the issues of yesterday, we are focusing on curbing excessive demand for Forex. We have guests here with us in the studios, and they are all regulars on Good Morning Nigeria. One of them, of course, is a carryover from yesterday. He was in our Kaduna Network studios yesterday, and today is right here in Abuja with us. Pleasure, of course, to have with us Shuaibu Idris. Shuaibu Idris, banker, financial analyst and consultant, member National Institute, and managing director, Timeline Consult. Glad to have you again on Good Morning Nigeria.
Good morning, Kingsley, and good morning, Nigerians. Thank you once again for having me.
All right, Juman.
Also here with us in the studio is Professor Uche Waleke, Professor of Finance and Capital Market, Nasarawa State University, and former Commissioner for Finance, Imo State. Also a regular. You're welcome.
Thank you so much. Good morning, Nigerians.
We also have in the studio Ni Akisuju, Investment and Financial Analyst. Good morning, Ni.
It's a pleasure as always. Thanks so much.
All right, gentlemen, once again, to contextualize our conversation for today, you heard excerpts from what went on yesterday to say that under the new Forex regime, it is demand and supply. But that we have an elephant in the room, of course, along with, if you may, other animals. Some of them are also wild cats. In Africa, we have the 5 big cats that are in the jungle. How do we tame our appetites for Forex? Because if the demand is always there and the supply doesn't match or outstrip it, the stability that we are seeking to achieve just might not materialize. Some of them, of course, were ticked off yesterday. Appetite for raw material, some of which ordinarily we could source domestically. Appetite for finished goods, some of which we could also produce here. Appetite for school fees, for vacation, for health tourism, and many more. So let's begin with Niyi Akinsiju. Niyi, we are hungry for Forex. How do we tame our appetite?
Well, I think the policy has been implemented by the CBN has already indicated a tendency for managed floats, you know. And again, if we also do a throwback to the renewed hope outline, you know, as regards the Forex management, the president talked principally about a managed float approach, finding a pricing system within a managed float approach. I think the first step is the carryover of the 43 items limited to accessing the investors and exporters window. So to a large extent, we still have that. Now there is a clarity, of course, on assessing BTA, business transport travel allowance, and of course PTA, personal travel allowance. I also know that there is a need, you know, to control that, you know, because the truth of the matter is the dollar had actually become a store of value in the Nigerian economic system, and to that extent, there is a need to come up with a particular policy, you know, to discourage the dollar as a store of value, and perhaps most importantly, also reduce the inclination for the dollarization of transactions. You know, we have already seen, experienced some form of dollarization, you know, of transactions across board in Nigeria. So I think to a large extent there should be policy that will be deterrent, you know, in fact legally deterrent, to discourage people from transacting businesses and other forms of transaction in dollar. So to a large extent, I think those 43 items, you know, that are limited, I think given the president's outlook on industrialization, you know, I am hoping that this will fire those 43 items. For instance, it does not make sense that we still spend 577 billion naira equivalent on those 43 items, more or less smuggled, you know, into the economy in the first quarter of 2023. Now, what that tells you is that if you are looking at the price range at that time, the transaction rate at that time, you are looking at more than $1 billion that was sourced outside the official channel. And of course, that would always be a burden, you know, on the exchange rate. So there is a need to still go on ahead and deliberately create an enabling environment for the production of cement, for the self-sufficiency in cement, include oil, include palm oil. I mean, these are products that are indigenous to us. And I think to a large extent there's a need to start looking at these products and galvanize production around it, so that we don't even now create incentives for people to go through the back channels to get this fund. Because now that it's a free market, as it were, it means that even if you are limited to the investors and exporters window, you can of course go to the parallel market. And over the last 3 days, since Friday to now, it's interesting to know that the official rate, so-called investors and exporters rate, was even higher than the parallel market rate as at yesterday.
Yes, indeed. There's a little bit of drama being played around this Forex, and indeed Nigerians have a large appetite for dollars at Forex, you know, and you talked about the enabling environment for business. Well, some experts have said that is the avenue that people use to get dollars, and, you know, round tripping comes into play. Mr. Uche.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Jumai. Permit me to come from a theoretical perspective. The question is, why do people even demand dollars? You now realize that the demand for dollars is also a function of the demand for naira. Okay, and then why do people demand? Why do you demand money, naira? You demand money. Theory says for transaction purposes, for precautionary purposes, and to some extent for speculative reasons. Now, you won't be demanding money for transaction purposes or even precautionary purposes if money fails to perform one of its important functions, which is serving as a store of value. All right. So the moment you find the naira losing value, okay, as a result of inflation, you now have this tendency for people to substitute. We call it currency substitution, to look for some other currencies that they can also use as a store of value, which he mentioned. So the point I'm making is the demand for dollar is fueled by the high inflation rate we have in the country. If you look at the inflation trend from 1980 till date, okay, you look at the relationship between inflation trend and the demand for dollar, you will notice that the demand for dollar is usually higher during periods of very high inflation. Okay, because the naira loses value and people then resort to having dollar. Now that the restrictions on domiciliary accounts have been lifted, okay, one of the things of course we should expect is that it should incentivize the operation of domiciliary accounts. People can now put money in their domiciliary accounts. Don't also be surprised to also find that that account also becomes one for which people used to store value, particularly given the rising inflation rates in the country. Now, the reforms we are about witnessing in Nigeria today, namely the fuel subsidy removal, the exchange rate unification, and recently we also read that even electricity tariffs will soon go up. By July, because we hear the multi-year tariff order that was used in the past was based on $441, $441 naira to the dollar, okay, and 16.9% inflation rate. Now that these variables have changed, they are also saying tariffs will go up. So if tariffs go up, fuel price is removed, exchange rate unified at a higher equilibrium price, what do you find? You find a higher inflation rate. So inflation rate came in last month at 22.41%. Okay, the expectation is that this month and in the coming months it's going to be higher, and people are already trying to take positions in the dollar. Okay, knowing full well that inflation rate will rise, inflation is expected to rise. Some people are already doing what? Taking positions now in the dollar, because the dollar is serving as a store of value. And one of the things that also fuel inflation, another factor that is, also determines this demand for dollar, is also tied to the money supply. Okay, if you have increased money supply, in the past, part of why exchange rate also went up also has to do with the CBN ways and means. Okay, CBN ways and means contributed to a large extent to the rise in inflation and the currency substitution that we had. He also had government spending, government borrowing and spending. They also help to fuel inflation and also demand. You realize from my experience, anytime you finish FAC meeting, and this federal, state government and local, they get their allocations. The next day or the following day, dollar rates will rise, exchange rate will rise, and that is because much of that naira eventually comes to chase the few dollars, and that's also why you find the central bank about the same period, using more of open market operations to mop up, the naira. So more naira in the system, more inflation is also, inducing this demand for dollar. So for us to check the demand for dollar, we need to check inflation rates in Nigeria. As I said, there is theoretical support, to the fact that the exchange rate of a currency is a function of the inflation rate in the two countries, both foreign and the domestic. So the point I'm making is reduce the inflation rate today, okay? And of course, we know inflation rate today is also caused by cost-push factors. You are likely to also reduce the demand for dollar. This is in addition to the, the penchant for foreign goods, we've mentioned. But what's important, is low inflation will reduce, okay, the demand for dollar.
All right. Professor Uche Waleke, thank you very much there for your initial intervention. Shuaibu Idris, we'll bring you into the conversation now. What do we need to do to scale back our appetite for Forex?
I think the two initial speakers have done great justice to the topic, but I like to take it from angle of interrogating the various subsets of the market, i.e., who are those demanding for foreign exchange in Nigeria. Other than the government that demands foreign exchange to pay for, our diplomatic embassies as well as loans, Nigerians do demand for foreign exchange. Why do they demand for foreign exchange? Basically, 3-4, demand for foreign exchange. Number one is factories or companies operating in Nigeria wanting to buy foreign exchange to be able to import raw materials so that they can process these raw materials and deliver goods and services to us. There are other Nigerians that are into import, buying and selling. They buy or they import finished goods, so they demand for foreign exchange to import finished goods and resell in Nigeria. A third category is some of us Nigerians whose children are schooling abroad or who have fallen ill, either our parents, our relations are ill, so we need to demand for foreign exchange to be able to either settle our children's school fees or medical bills, or like Nia has said, to buy the dollars or foreign exchange for business travel. The last category, but not the least, is like I mentioned yesterday, is the big monster that we have in our ecosystem. That is corruption. Yes, dollar is a store of value when and where there is inflation, as Professor has said. But Prof, really, is dollar the only store of value? Can't we buy gold? Can't we buy other metals to store value? Why don't we buy real estate to store value? There are quite a number of real value where these things can be stored. We have an OPEC system, and I think the new government and hopefully those that will be saddled with the responsibility of managing our fiscal and monetary policies need to take a holistic look of where have we come from, why are we where we are, and what do we need to do to get out of where we are. Prof, you rightly mentioned, and we've discussed this over and over at this, if you like, People's Parliament. The central bank was just pumping naira, and I always, give an analogy to the balloon. When you have a balloon and you put air into it, what it will eventually do is it will burst. So the CBN was intervening in terms of this kind of intervention, textile intervention, agriculture intervention, airline intervention, and most of those interventions were not targeted at the real people who need to do economic activities that can reduce inflation. Instead, most of those interventions were diverted. And like I did say, as long as we don't tame the monster called corruption, if someone steals from our commonwealth and he or she is looking for an avenue to hide those, loots, you ask him or her, to buy dollars at 1,000 naira to a dollar, he or she will gladly do so. So first and foremost, yes, those other items or demands that I have dimensioned, we need to look at them, but over and above that, we will all agree with me, you will agree with me, that it is practically impossible for an importer or a manufacturer to buy dollar at any rate when he or she knows that the market will not be able to accept or accommodate the potential price increase. One fundamental thing that we probably need to do is the operation of this foreign currency domiciliary account. Every climate, go to United Kingdom, go to US, go to Ghana, you seldom have a banking system that allows you to pay any other currency other than currency of that country over the counter. Why does Nigeria has a policy where I can take dollar or pound sterling or euro and go to a bank and pay? You go to United Kingdom today, you land in London, you have dollars, you have a Barclays bank account or NatWest bank account, you aren't allowed to go to the bank and deposit your dollar. They will ask you, go to a bureau de change, sell the dollars to a pound sterling, then come back and pay. As long as we allow, over-the-counter processing of foreign currency in Nigeria, this is one of my suggestions as to the way to tackle collection of dollars and inputting them. When the BDCs were given dollars, Central Bank will give almost $2 million per week. Where does this money end up to? In our banks. And I bet you the $1 billion that NIA has alluded to for importation of those 43 items, the monies for those imports was still coming from our Commonwealth. Because when these monies are stolen, they get into the banking system and they are round trip into funding those 43 items. And in the first instance, should Central Bank really be concerned about which item should be imported and which item shouldn't be imported? Isn't that a fiscal policy realm? But we had an OPEC system under the past government. The finance ministry and the finance minister somewhat abdicated their responsibility. The CBN governor was, the darling of everybody, so he could do almost anything and get away with almost anything. And that's why we feel, there is need for a holistic review of what went wrong in the last 8 years or thereabout, and how do we get out of this quagmire. Unfortunately, time is not on the side of President Tinubu. The earlier we do it tomorrow or today, the better. Yes, he's taken some courageous steps. Yes, it's been, commended, but we need to do even more in terms of changing some of these policies that have gotten us to a level of a doldrum kind of.
Shaibu Idris, thank you so much for that. Let's come back to Nia Akinsuju. He has raised a lot of issues here, round tripping, the Forex exchange market itself, hiding money in investment. And Shaibu Idris also, suggested that we can use real estate and other businesses to, store funds. Instead of just buying dollars, we can use gold and all that. Let's have your opinion on that.
It's liquidity.
Okay.
See, if you store in real estate, it may take a while, if you want to transform real estate into your needed cash. It may take 2 months, 3 months. But if you store in dollars, for instance, it's just strolling across the road to zone 4, or in some cases, you now have a virtual fintech that do all those transactions for you, and you even get telegraphic money. So the consideration actually is the threshold, and the time lag between transforming your asset to liquid cash. So perhaps gold, and gold too is also specialized. So the attraction really for dollar is that it's very, very mobile, very movable, you know, and can be transformed within minutes. But again, that does not detract from the fact that it is inappropriate. You know, it is not proper for people to steal money from the government or from the Nigerian people, and of course find it's also a double jeopardy. You go and buy the dollar, you increase the rate by your purchasing. If you move in 100 million naira into any market, black or I&E, you are purchasing dollars at that point in time, either at spot market rate or whatever rate, the rate would increase, and that will impact, of course, those who genuinely need the dollar in terms of the rate they are going to purchase for either services or for purchases of manufacturing raw materials. But for me, you know, the corruption leg of Madam Shuaib's argument is that we should look at corruption holistically. The purchases and all that are the exit points. There are more fundamental value chains, to corruption. And I think over time it had been more of talking and all that. I think there's a need to have, precise policy positions on how corruption will be tamed, in Nigeria. For every electoral cycle, we have always had emblazoned hope and aspiration that finally this thing will be tamed. But at the end of that cycle, we don't get anywhere. So it's as long as somebody is able to pick money from somewhere, nobody will stop him from purchasing whatever he wants to purchase. So the line should be limit access to somebody taking money that belongs to the people, so much that he will now not successfully take the money and go and buy whatever, either real estate or whatever. At the point in time, you could not get an average 3-bedroom flats in Abuja because some people were using it as store of value. They were building real estates everywhere with people not staying in them. Empty houses. And you still have some of them till now.
But as you said, nobody can reach them. But if you also go around Abuja, you will see what is scribbled on the fence or on the walls of those structures. EFCC, keep off.
Some of them. for every EFCC keep off, there are 10 others that are yet to get that mark. And it means that those people had access, however, primarily or secondarily, to the people's fund. So we should not allow it to come to that exit point where they are investing. Because once they get to investing, either in gold, in real estate and all that, it distorts the market. Because black money had entered the market.
No. It's not black money. It's dirty money. Dirty money.
Okay, dirty money.
Yeah, it's dirty money, not black money. The New York Institute, thanks a lot for the comments that you have made. But I thought that Shuaibu Idris raised a significant point about how domiciliary account should be better funded. That no one should come from within the domestic economy and pay over the counter hard currency into a domiciliary account, unless, of course, you imported that money and then you would have had a customs declaration at the point of entry to say, I'm coming into, not myself, Shuaibu is a big man. So Shuaibu is coming, Shuaibu is coming into the country, and then you have your customs form declaration, you see the money, and let's say, maybe $1 million, or no, well, that's an exaggeration. Let's say $20,000. You have $20,000. You have a customs receipt. So the following day, because you don't want to be carried the bar, because you don't know the chairman that you will encounter on the road. I use chairman advisedly. Chairman in italics. You know those rough guys. You meet them and then they strip you of everything. So you say, okay, best bet. Let me take you to the bank. You get to the bank. You show your customs receipt, genuine receipt, and then you pay the money. But for nobody to just simply walk in and have $10,000 I want to pay into my account because that's the threshold, that could be a problem. But there's another, I know that we'll deal with the corruption issue still, but demand for Forex. Organized private sector, one of their perennial complaints is lack of access to Forex for the importation of raw materials. When the borders were closed, they were showing us videos of a long queue stretching over a kilometer or more of articulated trucks loaded, they said, with raw materials that were supposed to come in to power the economy. So we keep hearing this story about raw materials. And Niyi, you made an important point about value chain. It should be part of our national embarrassment now that we are importing palm oil. And the many derivatives from palm oil. So how do we address the issue of substitution of the many raw materials that we say we want to go and get? Raw material. Is it capital flight or is it a genuine demand? And can we satisfy that demand significantly from within? Professor Waleke.
Thank you, Kingsley. Before I respond to that, I think we should do whatever we can to discourage dollarization or currency substitution. My experience in this regard has to do with a period we went to Ghana for a conference, and we were staying in a hotel very close to the airport, and we opted to pay in dollars. We had dollars to pay, but the hotel people said that they were not accepting any dollars from us, that we should go to the bureau de change into cedi, and then come and pay.
Yeah, in Ghana.
In Ghana. Yes, so
no, there in Ghana.
There in Ghana.
There in Ghana.
Yes, so here you find even some educational institutions insisting or encouraging you to pay your fees in dollars, and the rest of them. So I think that should be discouraged. Now, part of why the central bank had to intervene, I always argue, maybe a slight point of departure from Malam Swaibu. My argument is the multiple exchange rate we had in 2016, was as a result of the prevailing circumstances at that time. Crude oil sales fell, okay, our reserves were depleting, and the central bank didn't have any option, or a better option at that time, but to introduce the multiple windows. But what we know is that multiple windows are meant to be temporary. They are not meant to be, prolonged. Okay. One of the measures the central bank also introduced about the same time was to curtail, the demand. Has to do with these 41 items, later 42, and then later, 43. Yes, I agree. That's something that is actually in the fiscal realm. But where the fiscal authorities are not living up to their expectation, I think the central bank now, had to come in using that administrative measure to say that these items are not eligible, for forex. That was also meant to encourage import substitution, okay? And I think reports we had at 2017, 2018 also showed that a number of companies in Nigeria, local companies, actually started or went into the production of some of those items, such as toothpick. We heard about a toothpick factory in Calabar, for example, on account of that policy. So import substitution is the way to go, because that's also what will reduce the demand. I agree that right now the fiscal side should come in and discourage the import of some of those items, whether it is palm oil, whether it's discourage them using fiscal tools, such as taxes, for example. Okay, why the monetary authority should now concentrate on monetary policy. So I agree that we should do something in the area of encouraging local production, and then discouraging the things that we can ordinarily produce here. As we are coming in, I was joking with Niyi. I said that part of why we are having this challenge is because his type will go and buy this suit I said is from London, UK made. Okay. in the past, in the 80s and 90s, a lot of fabrics were worn in Nigeria were either from Funtua or Asaba or Kano, Lagos, Aba, and the rest of them. Okay. Today, over 90% of the fabrics of what we wear, are imported. So these are the issues. If you also look at look at this, what we have, the situation where we are now. A new government has come into place. At the federal level, we have a new government. We have new National Assembly leaders. We have new governors and so on. These people are going to eventually, procure vehicles. They are going to procure bots. Bots have been dissolved. Okay, the new ones, will also want vehicles and furniture. Where are they going to get these vehicles and furniture? Okay, you will also realize that the bulk of these vehicles are going to be imported, and we don't buy Prado with Naira. You use dollar. Is it possible? Okay, and I think it is for the government, under President Bola Ahmed Tinubu to, encourage the use by government officials of locally made vehicles. Okay,
like
that's what I mean. Yes, yes, there are many of them at the moment.
Professor Waleke,
yes.
Thank you. What you're getting into another area. Right?
That's the demand. We're talking about the demand.
Yeah, another area of demand, which is finished goods. My question, we could get to finished goods later. Fine points that you have raised. I'm talking about raw materials. Raw materials. How do we curb our appetite for it? Is the demand for raw materials, is it genuine? What kind of raw materials are we talking about? At some point, if you remember, gentlemen, you guys, happily you were all with us when we had the first recession in 2016, and some of the ideas that you propounded were very helpful in steering us out of that first recession, 2020, another recession. You were also our guests. The suggestions were brilliant. I remember we also discussed extensively the 41 items that the CBN excluded from access to Forex. One of those items, I'm sure you remember, wheelbarrow. A wheelbarrow. It's as simple as a wheelbarrow looks. So we are looking therefore at what are these raw materials? Can't they be found here? We are told that if you process yam, if you process cassava, you have industrial, SARS, pharmaceutical. What can we do as part of saying, look, let's focus on these items? Is it our research institutes? Are we going to now start commercializing their findings? What do we need to do? Back again to Professor Waleke before we bring in Shwai.
Yes, I think we had that was even the whole idea behind the structural adjustment program. For companies to backwardly integrate, and it is still relevant today that companies should backwardly integrate, meaning source your raw materials, locally. A part of why, in my view, some of them will want to source raw materials, abroad. It could also be, something to do with cost. If they feel that it is cheaper for them, okay, to get these raw materials abroad, relative to sourcing it within, of course, they will go for the ones that are coming in, from overseas. Okay, so that means that we have to also make the conditions right here. Again, that also takes me to the issue of inflation, for example, and even security. If those raw materials are in areas where there is insecurity, and they can't easily access them, okay, they will of course be compelled to get them, from overseas. So it is taken into consideration some of these factors, that I've mentioned, whether it's insecurity, whether it's even the cost of, doing business here, generally, whether it's even the cost of infrastructure provision, because sourcing raw materials will also require maybe power. Sourcing raw materials may also require even water supply. So all these will add to the cost of raw material. Remember, cost of raw material is a direct cost, is a major input to your cost of production. So if it will add to your cost of production and make your product less competitive, okay, a typical entrepreneur who has access to raw materials coming in from abroad will want to, use those options.
Tribal.
Well, Kingsley, remember at one of our discussions, we did consider what former President Obasanjo did to Nigeria as far as cement production is concerned. We had a country we still have a country where greater proportion, 60-70% of our land mass beneath it is limestone and other raw materials for cement production. And yet, we had a country that was a net importer of cement. President Obasanjo sat down and said, hell no, in the next 2-3 years, Nigeria must be a net exporter of cement, not an importer. Where are we today? We are net exporters of cement. This country, under President Omar Musa Yar'Adua, we had a national policy on sugar production. We had a national policy on wheat production. And the idea was, in 3 to 5 years, we must be able to be self-sufficient in sugar production. Because why? Like we said yesterday, we had like 32 dams in Nigeria. Why can't we produce sugarcane that can feed our, sugar refineries? We've not been doing that. We've refused to do that, and we are leaving it. So the point you keep hammering, Kingsley, raw materials, raw materials, raw materials. When you take the import list of the CBN, you realize that wheat import, we spend an average of close to about $1 billion annually to import wheat. Need we have a country like Nigeria, 930,000 square kilometers, 60% of which is arable land, and yet we are ashamed of ourselves that we are importing wheat to process? $1 billion will be of the import bill, or of the demand for dollars. Needless to talk again about the sugarcane production, and quite about other raw materials that we need.
And palm oil.
And palm oil. And name them. Prof, you mentioned, we have a factory producing toothpick. Gentlemen and ladies, should we even have any iota of sense that we Nigerians will be walking on the street to say we are importing toothpick? These are things, but you see, the issue is with our policy makers, and I'm sorry, I'm not being particular or personal. It's about civil servant. The civil servant of this country, and indeed the elites, not just the civil servant, all of us elite, we need to begin to have an enlightened self-interest about this country called Nigeria. Unless otherwise we have this enlightened self-interest, we will not be able to get out of the quagmire we have taken ourselves to the level. I give you one example, and this is a true life example. I will paraphrase, I don't want to mention names. We are on national television. When the government roll out a policy of backward integration, companies should go ahead, source raw materials locally. A particular conglomerate, a leader in Nigerian manufacturing sector, partly owned by foreigners, partly owned by Nigerians, went into farming. They got a large-scale farm, 5,000, 10,000 hectares of land. To get fertilizer to grow sorghum was an issue. The managing director of that company, who happens to be a friend of mine, said they had to bring in their guys from UK to come and meet the then Minister of Agriculture, to talk about fertilizer. Need we be this, idiotic that we can't even help ourselves? That is how that project died a natural death. And the company don't do that again. No company goes into. So even when government rolls out the policy, implementation, civil servants will sit down and make sure that they frustrate and thwart you, the political leaders or the senior guys. And we, like I keep saying, the elite, we hate this country with a passion because we don't want to look at how best to pragmatically look at how do we make sure that this policy succeed. If there is an issue, what is that issue? What do I need to do to contribute to the resolution of that issue? So President Tinubu needs to look at the ecosystem once again and say to himself and to Nigerians, enough is enough. We need to have a policy on milk production. Why should this country be importing milk? Why should we import milk? We are importing meat, beef. This country is still importing frozen chicken. Go to Lagos, you will see it being imported from Benin Republic. Tomatoes. Come on.
For the tomatoes, it is women that will tell you this one is Ghana tomatoes. You know, he said this one is Cameroon pepper. It's the women that will tell you.
This is Ghana pepper. It's very, very hot. Yes. Kisuju, you know, before we go on that break, let me ask you this question, because Shuaibu Idris has a way with words when he's, you know, when he's passionate about this country. All of you are. We've discussed issues like this with you in the past. There's a move by African leaders of recent. We've heard some comments of, you know, African leaders encouraging Africans to use their own currency to do business. How can that help in curbing the excess demand for Forex if African countries can come together and use their own currency, you know, to get goods, to get whatever it is they need just across the border? Going into Niger, I don't need to go in with dollars or safer. I can go in with my naira to buy these raw materials. How can it help in curbing this excess demand, this unsatiable demand for dollars here in Nigeria? Can we key into this initiative that other African leaders are talking about now?
I've been following Afrexim Bank venture in that line, that's facilitating inter-African currency conversion, you know, which is commendable. But the limitation actually is what's the percentage of trade amongst Africans for now? We still do more transactions with countries in the West, you know, and to some extent in the East. Perhaps until we have effective streaming of the AF's African Free Trade Zone, it's close to 2 years that it had taken off officially. We are still to feel the impact, more or less. The percentage of intra-African trade is less than 5%, and that's unfortunate. All the raw materials that any industry will need, in Nigeria for instance, at least 80% of the raw materials are in this country. So if we don't have it, Congo will provide the other 20% or DRC and other countries like that. So which means you can actually self-sufficiently explore raw materials that are needed for industry in this country, I mean in Africa. But for me, we can even go beyond that and look at the value added. I tracked 2 crude palm oil producing companies over the last 3 years, Presco, Okomo Oil. And at the time this 43-item ban came in, the two were around 24, 36 naira respectively. Now, because of that ban, the 2 companies grew exponentially over the next 24 months. So much now that they are in their hundreds. The stock had gone to an average 180 for Okomu. In fact, at the point in time, it was 200 naira per unit, you know. And of course, the annual report suggests how robust it had become. So which means it had freshened up the financials of those 2 companies over these 24 months. So you can now imagine the opportunities availed, you know, investors in that sector, investors who are buying the stocks and investors who are also ready to invest in producing palm oil. Because palm oil is actually an existential product, raw material in the Nigerian manufacturing sector. So if we are able to focus properly properly drive productivity, it will reduce this demand for raw materials. I think it's laziness. It's either laziness or the investment promotion outfit in Nigeria is not doing enough, because the limitation of those items from accessing the I&E window is suggestive of the fact that here is an opportunity for you. The country is being protective of this industry. So both local domestic investors and foreign investors have a captive audience, have a captive market, to which they can harness if properly calibrated. So it's I would always believe there's a need to always protect your industry, where essentially you have the capacity and you have the raw materials in your ground or in the air, as it were. So why would we be importing crude oil? I mean crude palm oil. Why would we be importing margarine? We have companies that produce margarine in Nigeria. If you look at the costs of margarine now, it had gone up because they are not doing they are not sourcing the raw materials locally. And fat, oil and fat, these are native to us, they are indigenous to us. So there are things we should wake up, and I believe with what the government is doing now, investors who had been afraid, of course, of what will happen to their imported, with their capital importation, would be more, less anxious of the outcome to whatever they are bringing into the country, knowing that with unified exchange rate, free entry and free exit, when you bring in your money, your capital, you are also able to take it out, especially the patient capital, the foreign direct investments. And the whole idea, the whole advocacy is that we have 43 items that are waiting to be explored, harnessed, and to productively engage the economy.
Let me quickly add, Juma, if you permit me, that again, one of the things the government has said they will do to further promote or encourage these raw materials has to do with the establishment of commodity boards. Okay, and I think that's a step in the right direction. Governments should put in place the right environments for commodity exchanges, as a matter of fact, to flourish, not just the commodity boards, because that.
Okay, well, Professor Ochewa, okay, sorry, we're going to have to take a short break. It's a commercial break. You're welcome back, and it's still Good Morning Nigeria on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. Our three guests are still here with us, and we're discussing how to curtail excessive demand for foreign exchange. Some of the key items have been ticked off already, namely how to ensure that dirty money doesn't further pollute the system. Secondly, finished goods we touched on briefly. Now we're dealing with raw materials. I was just wondering, the issue of raw materials and palm oil that Niyi was talking about. I don't know where the holdings of Okomo and Presco are, because they seem to be the two most prominent. But the Southeast, you had the Michael Okpara administration in the First Republic cultivate thousands of hectares of palm plantations in the Southeast. And in fact, there's some Umbakwe International Airport at Owerri. If you look at the surrounding environment, there are palm trees, which would tell you that the airport probably was carved out of a palm plantation in the past. And from that airport to Owerri City, you see palm trees left, right, and center. Nobody's doing anything. They're idle. Nobody's doing anything. So will it require President Tinubu to go and kickstart those things, or to get investors? Well, you all keep making a lot of, So how do we gain traction with this? That's by the way. But an issue that I would like to raise, gentlemen, because as I said, from the organized private sector, some of the players, and more particularly the multinational corporations, there is no raw material, as you indicated, gentlemen, that you are looking for that you probably cannot find in Nigeria. There's none. So, is it part of the over-invoicing strategy of some of these businesses? Part of profit-shifting arrangements? So that you say if you have no control over the cost that the supplier will quote from abroad, if you're a multinational agency, instead of $1 million, they quote $5 million. So it becomes an opportunity for legitimate, if fraudulent, capital flight and profit shifting. You know, so you shift the profit to another subsidiary of yours, and other taxation and so on and so forth. So I know you are itching to respond to this. So how do we get forensics to also weigh in here and let them know that, gentlemen, this game can't continue?
I think, Kensley, you just hit the nail on the head. The organized private sector, as organized as we claim we are, because I can't exclude myself, we've not been able to self-regulate and self-discipline ourselves. I will again mention a very, very important aspect that has been dear to my heart in this country. From General Ibrahim Badamasi Babangida's time till today, we have had an agency called Nigerian Export Promotion Commission. Exporters of agri-produce are given export expansion grant. If you export $1 value of an agri-produce, you are given 5%, that is 5 cents. So head or tail, you are not going to lose, even if you sell your produce outside at lower than your cost. The incentives in certain categories once went as high as 25%, which means for every $1, 25 cents is given to you. And the purpose is to do what? To expand the export. Now, cashew nuts, sesame seed, kenaf, goma arabic, name them, have been exported over the years. Hide and skin. From Babangida's time till today, this country, and indeed from our collective commonwealth, exporters have been given nothing less than 10 trillion naira as gift. Now, gentlemen and ladies, there has not been one factory that has come up in processing of cashew nuts, sesame seed, kenaf, or any of these agricultural produce, despite the pumping of this money. Where has this money gone? Where has been our conscience in terms of monitoring and evaluation of these monies that has been given to this? And these are the raw materials we are talking about that we need to harness. Gentlemen, you know, like I keep saying, as long as we don't have an enlightened self-interest, as long as our civil servants, who are supposed to be the custodian of policies and those who are supposed to guide and ensure that these policies are implemented to the letter, and deviant are, caught and punished, we will forever remain where we are. And I do pray that we have a mechanism and the courage to ensure that some of these policies are implemented to the letter.
Which one?
Yeah, I also think that one of the things this unification of exchange rates will do will be to discourage what Kinsley mentioned about over-invoicing. At least that incentive is removed. Because I recall in 2016 we had this window that is called the secondary market intervention sales window. Secondary market intervention sales window was meant for import of raw materials, and a lot of people also took advantage of that, because that window happens to be one of the windows with the least exchange rate. So people took advantage of that to also import or at least over invoice. So the unification of exchange rates will check that. Another thing I also think that is responsible for firms importing rather than sourcing locally also has to do with the quality of the raw materials themselves. The quality. If the quality is not competitive, if it is low quality, an entrepreneur would prefer to, import, to.
So how do you ramp up the quality?
Yes, how to ramp up the quality is through commodity exchanges, okay? Which is also why I think, yes, the government has talked about commodity boards, but more emphasis should be on commodity exchanges so that we don't go back to the era of the commodity boards where government had, direct intervention controlling prices. One thing that a commodity exchange will help you do, if you look at the entire ecosystem of a commodity exchange, a very important, player there, has to do with the standardization or quality assurance. Okay, so the quality assurance mechanism will ensure that those products are competitive, and there is also the warehousing part. The warehousing part that will also reduce this issue of post-harvest losses. So by the time we promote commodity exchanges, you have warehouses, for example, that, as I said, that will ensure that these commodities, are well stored, and post-harvest losses are reduced. Part of the challenges we have in this country with respect to this commodity, you mentioned tomatoes, okay, they are perishable, okay, also has to do with the high post-harvest losses we've been having. So a commodity exchange ecosystem will reduce these losses. Will also ensure that these commodities are standardized, okay, such that they can become real inputs for productive activities. You mentioned, you cited Imo State, gave examples. I want to also add there that yes, you're very correct. Imo is very rich in terms of even the palm oil you talked about. In Imo State, there is this Adapam project that used to flourish in the past, but unfortunately today the entire place is functioning at below capacity, and that's also because over time again, the state was relying, just like every other state, on what has come from the center. So I think it's time that state governments, not only in Imo but elsewhere, particularly in these regions where these raw materials are located, paid attention to them. Whether it's in the southeast for palm oil or even in the southwest. Remember, during the regional era, southwest was known for cocoa, southeast for palm oil, and the north then we had granules and the rest of them. So I think we can return to those glorious era.
But Professor Waleke, thank you very much. I should mention that palm. It also reminded me of reason palm. Reason palm was rivers.
Yeah.
I don't know what has happened because all we keep hearing illegal bunkering, illegal bonfire, and all kinds of things. Reason palm. Those were part of the expansion ground. And recently, I was reading about what India is trying to do with its rubber plantations. Rubber. Well, you're talking about the Midwest, known for rubber. And of course, with the boom in crude oil, Victor Wifo released a song saying that the rubber business had fallen.
We let go so many.
In the late 70s.
Let go so
rubber. I mean, if you we
let go so much for so little.
Rubber trees, that's the rainforest belt, where you could get that. Of course, we all have cars, and then we know the tires are not made of steel because they're not armored. So they're made of rubber. Where do we get our rubber from? Carbon black that you also need to get a tire. Carbon black is from one of the derivatives of crude oil production, and if one of those refineries were operational, they will be producing that. But I want to come back to NIE as we wrap this up. In terms of organized private sector, because sometimes when you keep hearing we have to import raw materials, it's, as I said, I drew the attention to profit shifting, also especially to over-invoicing. What can the government do to incentivize, say, the multinationals to have more investments in R&D locally? Research and development. It's not sufficient to say that your R&D is headquartered, I'm just giving you an example, in Switzerland, headquartered in Oklahoma, headquartered in elsewhere. Where is your R&D here? And what incentives, what tax rebate or otherwise that can be given so that you have that value chain and then you know how to pursue it. Otherwise, the key thing you keep hearing is raw material, raw material, raw material.
What I know is that at least most breweries are now sourcing their basic raw materials locally. You know, there's a ship from Bali to Sugom. And that's actually an outcome of R&D by local breweries. And it had also helped their financials too over time. But going forward, I just want to, there's this troubling figure that had always troubled my dream. I mean, my sleep. This palm oil thing. That at a point in time, we abandoned 20 million trees, palm trees, you know, to nothing. Nobody was attending to them. 20 million palm trees. I was like, in this same country, of course, it does mean that they were not bringing in fast money. And it only describes the kind of business our private sector also want to be involved in. Perhaps until recently, when banks, you know, would, of course, give loan of 4 or 5 years tenure. We know that for some time, it used to be under 1 year, you know, and perhaps 24 months. So it means that the gestation period allowed for businesses and projects in Nigeria had always been short, you know. So the general idea is to look for where the money would go in fast and come out fast. You know. So there's a need to start moving from that paradigm into a paradigm where you know you want to invest. For instance, the raw materials, as Prof noted, that are not up to world class standard is an opportunity for an entrepreneur, you know, to upgrade from that from the unprocessed raw material, as it were, to processed raw material that will be suitable for industry. You know, so it's a business economic opportunity waiting. You know. So generally, the whole thing still has to do with the average Nigerian mind. And when I'm saying average Nigerian mind, the elite mind, because it's the elite. Well, some of us, I consistently call it elite consensus, because as far as I'm concerned, the elite should know what is appropriate for Nigeria. But what has been the kind of consensus that we had always, you know, established as the objective, the material objective of the elite class, it had always been to take advantage over the others. So can we look at the opportunities available? There are Nigerians that are seated in their sitting room today that have $1 billion naira doing nothing in their account. They are not, that money is not even in the stock market, where you can be lazy. It's not even in the fixed income market where you can lazy with it. You know? Dead capital. So can we be more conscious of our responsibility to this economy, so that we don't think that federal government is only responsible for the economy. The subnationals must also be responsible for the economy. If you have 10 million somewhere hidden in a bank account or in somebody's asset, go and bring it out. It's active money. Go and put it somewhere that can multiply and impact the economy going forward.
On the final note,
just
30 seconds.
Yeah, on a final note, Kinsley, you did allude to the fact that over-invoicing. I think the central bank has been a bit complacent. When people are buying dollars for raw materials, you know, it doesn't take you more than 5 minutes to check out the international price of any commodity that one is importing. Most multinational companies, they import from their own companies. What do I mean? I will name names. Unilever. Unilever has a world-class purchasing center in Singapore. Everything they import in Nigeria, they first buy from Unilever, Singapore. Olam, they have a world-class purchasing center in Singapore. When they are buying wheat for Nigerian operation, they pay to Unilever. So there could be over-invoicing and taking profit at early level. Central bank officials, when they are looking at the invoicing and the LCs that when they are buying, they need to do much more than a thorough check. You did allude to the fact that stock market, you could buy, you know, Okpomu or what. Those are other avenues of store of value instead of dollars that one can easily buy and sell. So there are other store of values that are near liquidity in terms of cash. Thank you.
Yeah, Professor Ocho Waleke, of course, Professor of Capital. Prof, we are pressed for time. I hope we can get back to what we saw in the capital markets in the mid-2000s, before the capital market crashed in 2008, and people, you know, who got their fingers burnt. Then if you mention stock market to them now, they would say, I don't want to go.
Those ones were involved in.
All right, that's right. On which note, Jumai, let's thank our guest. We are pressed for time. So it's a subject matter we'll always come back to, and we hope, gentlemen, as always, you know, you will oblige us with your informed comments and informed suggestions and proposals on how we can get the economy going.
Okay, Shaibu Idris, member of National Institute and Managing Director, Timeline Consult Limited. Thank you so much for coming all the way from Kaduna to be in the studio this morning.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure having you. Professor Uche Owaleke, Professor of Finance and Capital Market, Nasarawa State University, and former Commissioner for Finance, Imo State. Thank you.
Thank you, Jumai.
And Ni